Welcome to Lizzie's Bedtime Stories, episode 38, and I'm welcoming a new storyteller, Cindy Rizzo, and she self-published her novel. Welcome to the show, Cindy.
Hi, glad to be here, Liz.
So, how groovy is it to, get your book out there?
It's amazing, really. I can't even tell you how exciting it is and a little scary at the same time, but mostly very positive. I've been really happy with the reception that the book's gotten. That's
great. It's great to be the master of your own destiny when you're a self-publisher. That's what happens.
Yep.
So you're going to be reading an excerpt from your novel, but it's not the first chapter.
That's right. I thought this would be a good excerpt to sort of set the stage for what's happening between the two main characters. The book is called Exception to the Rule, and it's genre-wise a contemporary lesbic romance. And I learned as I was finishing the book that it's actually also part of another genre called New Adult. And when I asked a friend who is in the publishing business what that meant, she said it's young adult with sex. So it's a fairly new genre, and it's usually for characters that are over 18 to late 20s or 26 or so. So that's where my characters fit. They're in college.
That is just so funny, like new adult, can I tell you? Because
it has websites, it has followings, it's a thing already.
But so it's just a quirky phraseology. Like, for example, I went to Mount Holyoke College, which is a women's college. So we were first years, we were not freshmen.
Right.
Because we were not men.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Well, my characters start out as freshmen, and the two main characters in the book are Robin Green, who comes from Long Island, New York, and she hates living in the suburbs. She's an aspiring and very talented writer, and she spends a lot of her time before going away to college in the city, where she befriends a group of homeless queer kids. And that becomes her sort of frame of reference for her own sort of coming of age as a young lesbian. And the other main character is Tracy Patterson. Tracy comes from Durham, North Carolina, and the school that they both attend, Adams University, is right outside of Boston. And Tracy ends up there because her father is an alumni, and he begs her to go there. He thinks it'll be a great place for her. And Tracy is also knows she's a lesbian, but she's very closeted. She's very feminine. She has long blonde hair and, sort of classically pretty. She's had a fake boyfriend all through high school. Her friend Brett, who's gay, who has his own boyfriend named Jeff. And she's kind of flown under the radar, having affairs with mostly older women.
Pardon me.
So she goes to college, sort of not knowing what to expect. In addition to how she should be as a young lesbian, she's also a Southerner coming north. And a lot of her first impressions are very negative, and she's really sort of at sea. And at school, both Robin and Tracy befriend a third young woman named Angie Antonelli, who's also a lesbian. So the book is mostly about Robin and Tracy and what happens between them, but Angie is their best friend.
So the reading that you're doing right now, where are they?
The reading I'm doing now is set in during this winter break, freshman year, in North Carolina. It's from Tracy's point of view. And Tracy's been home. She's very restless and impatient. Her friends notice that. And Brett and Jeff take her to a party on New Year's Eve that some gay students that they've met in college are throwing. Both men and women are going to be there. And Tracy's convinced that what she really needs is to have sex with someone. And she's hoping to pick someone up at the party. And that's when this starts.
Okay.
So I can start now.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, here we go. Tracy walked into the kitchen, poured herself a vodka tonic, and drank it quickly. She then refilled her glass with just soda water and walked around. She'd outfitted herself for the night in a tight-fitting, very short black dress that hugged her hips and showed off legs toned by 15 years of dance classes. The bodice of the dress was black lace and the straps thin satin, suggesting a slip. It ended at the top of her breasts, displaying a hint of cleavage. Her hair was down, falling right past her shoulders. Not wanting to be mistaken for straight, which was a problem for the feminine lesbians she'd run into in the bars, she noticeably checked out every woman in the crowd. Many looked back, but as she suspected, they were around her age and not all that interesting. She decided to try her luck downstairs, and if nothing materialized, to bug Brett about making their exit to the bar. The basement of the house was very dark, lit only by a few strings of tiny white Christmas lights. The music, which had floated upstairs at a decent level, was deafening down there, and people were dancing. Once her eyes adjusted, she searched out the women, put down her glass, and moved to the center of the floor to dance near a group that had bunched together without noticeable pairings. It felt good to move her body and to see the looks of appreciation on the faces around her. She danced like that for about 15 minutes until the music slowed down and she decided it was time for another drink. As she approached a counter lined with clear amber and green bottles, she tried to find the vodka, looking closely in the dark for the right label. "What can I get you?" a voice asked in her ear. She turned to face the source and saw a taller woman with short dark hair, buzzed on the sides and spiky on top. She appeared to be a little older than the girls Tracy had seen upstairs, so she decided to investigate. What can you get me?" she asked back with a smile. "There's a dangerous question." The woman smiled. "Let's start with a drink. How about that?" "Okay then, vodka and tonic." "You're more of a vodka girl than a gin girl, I take it." "Vodka has fewer calories." "Which is how you're able to fit into that dress, I suppose. Not that I'm complaining." Tracy looked right into the woman's eyes. "I'm Tracy." "Dana. Pleased to meet you, Tracy," she said as she began to reach for the tall rectangular bottle of vodka. Dana was dressed casually in black jeans and sneakers, a white button-down shirt, and a black suit vest, a look Tracy loved on a woman. After she handed Tracy her drink, they talked for a little while on the sidelines, sitting close and speaking into one another's ears to be heard over the music. The conversation topics were the typical pre-pickup subjects. Do you live around here? Where do you go to school? Did you come alone or with anyone? Tracy managed through them effortlessly, deciding after a few minutes that this Dana, a North Carolina State grad student who had an apartment off campus, would be a perfectly adequate way to ring in 1994, provided she could pass the dance test. Tracy could always get a clue about how a woman would be in bed by the way she danced. She knew this wasn't exactly foolproof. She was sure there were plenty of bad dancers who were great sex partners and vice versa. But she always enjoyed this little game of hers, trying to predict prowess between the sheets by assessing someone's performance on the dance floor. Back at school, as the semester was ending, she had convinced Angie and Robin to go dancing to let off steam after all their hard work. Angie had brought Nikki along, and the two of them danced for a while and then walked over to a dark corner together. Tracy stood to the side, watching Robin dance with someone. Robin's fluid movements and intuitive feeling for the music were a shocking surprise. Her body seemed to almost change shape when she danced. She seemed taller and more what? Sexy? In control? Hot. Wow, thought Tracy, transfixed as she stared at Robin's hips, rocking in a smooth and natural back-and-forth rhythm. She must be amazing in bed. Even just considering that silently was enough to make Tracy blush and turn away. She was uncomfortably warm, and she couldn't help but notice an ache between her legs. She headed to the front of the bar for a quick reprieve outside the door to get some cold night air. Where did that come from, she wondered. As she and Dana now danced, facing one another, the word adequate again came to Tracy's mind. Dana wasn't a great dancer, but she moved her body nicely and kept the rhythm of the music. By the time the DJ slowed things down and they drew close to one another to dance, Tracy was ready to nudge the evening forward. She leaned her head on Dana's left shoulder and lightly kissed her neck, causing Dana to shiver and hold on tighter. That gave Tracy the signal she needed. "Is your apartment nearby?" she asked in Dana's ear. Dana pulled her head up and just nodded, prompting a sly smile from Tracy, who tilted her head to the side and said, "Good, let's go." Dana took her hand and led her upstairs, where she ran into Brett and Jeff on their way down. Brett looked at Dana, saw her grasp on Tracy's hand, and turned to his friend with a question on his face. Tracy gave him a slight nod, their usual signal. Brett caught it and smiled, mouthing, "Have fun," as Tracy was pulled past him. As they stepped into Dana's apartment, Tracy was surprised to discover that the suave, smooth woman at the party was a bit more shy than Tracy would have predicted. So she found herself taking charge, making the first move to kiss, get undressed, and run her hands over Dana's body. Once they were in bed, she finally took Dana's hand, moved it between her legs, and whispered, "I want you. Why don't you see how much?" She felt her arousal building, but forced herself not to grab Dana's tentative hand to get exactly what she wanted. Instead, she relaxed her body and closed her eyes. Immediately, the vision of Robin dancing came back to her, and she pictured it clearly in her mind, except this time, she was the one on the dance floor with Robin, their eyes locked, their bodies moving in the exact same way. Forgetting where she was and what was happening, Tracy focused intently on the imagined dance and the pressure building between her legs. The scene was vivid in front of her, Robin's fluid movements and her knowing smile. As Robin thrust her hips forward, Tracy leaned back slightly and then moved her hips in Robin's direction, in time to the music while Robin leaned back. They repeated this rocking motion several times, lost in one another's eyes. The vision lifted Tracy higher and higher to where she needed to get. The same thought then entered her mind as it had when she stood watching Robin from the sidelines. She must be amazing in bed. It propelled her forward over the crest of her climb and into her release, what she'd needed for days, for weeks. It was powerful, and it had nothing to do with the woman in the bed who was now holding her and whispering, "You're incredible." Tracy kept her eyes closed until she knew it would be impolite to do so any longer. She smiled at Dana and said, "It's only right that I thank you properly." She knew what she had to do, and she made quick work of it. Dana surged under her tongue, and Tracy got some satisfaction from the woman's pleasure. But after the obligatory cuddling, she swung her legs out of bed and reached for her dress, sitting like a puddle on the floor, explaining that her parents would expect her home and she couldn't stay the night. The half-hour drive back to Durham was disorienting. How could she have come so hard, fantasizing about Robin? What could that mean? She'd never even thought about Robin that way. It must be the dancing. She'd just gotten caught up in that memory. As she turned onto her darkened street, she thought about how difficult this winter break had been. She missed Angie and Robin so much. They had grounded her life, given her a safe harbor where she could be herself. They valued her brain and her sense of humor more than her looks. She decided that all of this weird stuff, including tonight, must be connected to the re-entry thing that Brett had been talking about. She was sure of it. It couldn't be about anything else. Robin was just her friend, nothing more. Well, she reasoned, at least the sex, however strange, made me feel a little more relaxed. And there's only 2 more weeks to go until I see her. I mean them. That's it.
Poor Butch. That poor Butch. Oh.
It is what it is.
Oh, yeah, I know. Well, yeah. I have to admit, I have committed that sin before.
Well, by then Tracy was pretty much a goner.
No, it's cool. I think my listeners, after getting that little snapshot, are going to run over and buy your book.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. And I would welcome anybody's feedback after they've read it and finished it.
Sure. Well, this was very nice little episode listening to you read. You did a fantastic job.
Thank you.